Hey everybody, this is the Ask the Sensei webinar through the VO Dojo. I'm Tish Hicks, the Master Sensei of the VO Dojo, and we are joined today by our Techno Sensei, Dan Lenard, the Home Studio Master, and our guest sensei today is my dear friend and colleague who literally was at the beginning of my 20-year voiceover career. I moved here from Chicago and said, hey, I'm doing voiceover. And our friend Perry Herman introduced us. So Jen's been a part of my career. But Jennifer Hale is here to join us and field any questions that you have. Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? We have people filling out what where they are at in their voiceover journey, but I'd love to hear in your own words what you've been up to. And
I'm in insane amounts of gratitude. I reinvent every day. You know, it's funny. One thing that I've learned is I can only speak about myself, but I never arrive. It's Groundhog Day every day. And I recently hit a point though where I'd walk into my booth here and I would feel this enormous pressure when I went to audition. And I was just like, oh God, what do they want? Because you're in a vacuum now when you read most of the time. And that vacuum can very quickly be filled by the noise in your own head, which is a very bad deal. Yeah. And, mine included. And most of my career journey has been about managing and getting into a more positive relationship with the noise in my head so I can actually let the freedom fly and the work be fun. And so in order to shake things up, I went back to class. I went to Charlie Adler. There's a few people who I really, really know have the what it needs to shake me up. And Charlie is absolutely one of them. And I did 4 weeks with Charlie and I came back and I was like, it's fun again. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm doing a lot of stuff and everything's NDA these days. So my internal policy is unless it's on the air, I don't speak about it. So I can't talk about anything I've done in the last couple months, but 6 to 9 months ago, working on a beautiful show called Lost in Oz, which is on Amazon. I love that show. Mm-hmm. And, Guardians of the Galaxy, I think I can say this, a couple different Lego projects, and that's all I'll say. I don't know if I'm allowed.
And you can talk about old stuff too.
Yeah, just working on a lot of stuff, some beautiful new games and a couple great new series. And I'm also engaging on the side in this thing, because I have a money podcast as well, which I think enormously important. It's called The Art of Money. It's on iTunes. I think I'm going to change the name though to Money Because You're Awesome. And to that end, I'm watching what's happening to our residuals. That whole structure is beginning to dissolve. Residuals are becoming a less common thing, and the rule of thumb is becoming there aren't residuals even in union work, or if they are, they're small. So I'm engaging in what I call my residual replacement plan, which is living on less than I make and taking the remainder and putting it into real estate. So, yeah, because I think in 70-year terms, like right now, I'm like, I don't need it, but I don't want it to be 10, 15 years from now and me to go, I'm just not in the mood. Oh, I have to,
Mm-hmm. So, no, it's interesting having, that's one of the most powerful things that we all, no matter where anyone is on this journey, we're all always in the mix and have to be on and figuring out why we're doing this and what we're doing it and how we're doing it and how it serves us.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Good. And Dan, I know you're just back from
Atlanta.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself real quick? And
sure. Yeah, I'm Dan Lenard. I'm the home studio master. I'm also a full-time professional voice actor. Based here in Los Angeles now. I moved here 3 years ago. And, not only am I trying to really find myself in the Los Angeles market, I still serve all my old clients that I had back when I was in Buffalo. And today I have an on-cam audition, which is fascinating because it's based off a headshot that I had 10 years ago, and but I still had the same shirt and tie. So.
and a little signature, the little signature thing.
Trying to look like an executive type.
That's great. But I know, Dan, you just got back from VoiceOver Atlanta, which is sort of the new wave of how things are going. So interested in the discussion of, this idea of how is everyone bridging old school, new school, old paradigm.
Well, it's a fascinating question, because what I found is, you got to remember, we're talking about two very different industries here. When you're talking about agents and all of this, the stuff that goes on here in LA and probably in New York and maybe Dallas and Chicago, that work clearly can be attained by anybody if they work hard at it and they take the classes and they really work at their craft. It's not, you can't break into that big stuff doing this as a hobby. But also there's a tremendous amount of work actually in industrial work, in e-learning, in corporate things, corporate business to business things, explainer videos. That's where people making a living are doing this, as opposed to somebody trying to get a commercial once a month that's going to pay their rent. So I found that rather interesting, that when agents are talking about this thing at a big conference, what they're saying is essentially irrelevant to about 95% of the people who are there. And they really need to learn to appreciate this other side of the industry where everybody is. There's 100,000 people in the voiceover business now, of which, maybe 15 to 20% are actually kind of making a living at it. And so you really have to be the best of the best. That's not to say to be discouraging. I'm saying it's one of those things you need to do, is study and really get the critiquing and the work from a professional coach that can determine whether you're ready or not, or if you have the skills ready to compete in the larger marketplace.
Right, and I think now more than ever, one needs to define how they want their life and how they want this to serve. And it's interesting coming from the other side of having been in the major markets for as long, and Jen, I mean, really being at the top of that profession for so long.
It's so interesting, Dan. You were totally taking me back. I started my career in Birmingham, Alabama, and I used to commute between Birmingham and Atlanta, and I did so many of those industrial training films, and mostly on camera. I would narrate them sometimes, but all my voiceover stuff there were 5 ad agencies in Birmingham that did nothing but syndicated car commercials. In other words, the car commercials for the local dealer, Roy Buckner Chevrolet, and I did all their on-camera stuff and all their VO stuff. I was not in the union yet. So it was started out at $50 a pop on the voiceover, worked my way up to 75. And the on-camera started out at 175, worked my way up to 300 over the course of 8 years. And it, that takes me back. You're absolutely right, Dan. That was the bread and butter that allowed me. But being in the trenches and doing that, I hustled so hard. At one point I was doing a play in Birmingham and a trade show in Atlanta. Trade show started at 9 a.m. and the play I had, my call time was 6 p.m. and it's 2.5 hour drive, but there's a 1 hour time difference. So that worked. But the point is it's that level of hustle gives you an opportunity to really develop your skills, so that then when I dropped into LA and decided to make a voice tape just to make some money, because I was out here in the on-camera world, not quite making enough, working, but it's not enough to pay your bills consistently. I made a VO tape just to pay the bills. But because of that volume of experience in those small jobs that you speak about, Dan, that are that 90%, it gave me the skills where I just dropped in and everyone said, "Oh, that's so brilliant." No, it's not. It's just time.
The hours.
Right. Just do your time. Just work out every day. Do your little practice every day. And I always say, don't, someone asked me the other day, well, people say this. I said, stop right there. You decide your future. You decide your path. Don't you be giving that away to anyone else.
Exactly. We talk about that all the time. I hate the word I'm submitting my demo. I'm submitting.
Sharing what I got.
I think this might help you. Yeah, I'm here to serve you. I've got something to offer you. Yeah. This is excellent. And yeah. the journey, I call it the voiceover journey because it is, and it's ongoing, and we all, so.
I've been doing this for 35 years.
Wow. That's
longer than most of the people on the line have been alive. So, there you go.
Yeah. I could probably say the same. I've been doing this since the Ford administration. So.
Right, there you go.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's take some questions. And so glad to see so many people here on the line. We've got 28 people on the line and 4 questions, one which is actually a clarification. So well, come, ask us questions. I'm going to answer Bill Clark's just real quick because it's about the dojo. Is VO Dojo purely a West Coast experience? No. We work with people all over the country and all over the world. I've been teaching master classes to people in Cairo. So yeah, no, it's an everywhere. It's an everywhere experience. So we can, if you're interested in what we're doing here, if it sparks, we can talk from wherever you are. Let's see. Ann Kengeiser in New York City says, what is the best way to start doing animation and games? I've just started and I'm doing commercial and narration. And it's been through, as a dojo member, she's come through. And she also just came off 3 years of a tour of Phantom of the Opera, too.
I have opinions about that, if I may render them. Improv. And improv. Get your butt into improv as soon as you can. Any chance you have to perform live, do it. And then after you've done a little bit of improv and you feel like you're up to scratch, then start taking some animation classes, but make sure it's people who actually work in the field, not people who just teach. It has to be someone who works in the field. Like Charlie, who does everything, right? Charlie's amazing. Charlie, Chris Zimmerman. I mean, there's so many. Debbie Derryberry.
Yeah, I think she's going to be our guest sensei next month.
Yeah, she is tough.
That'll be fun.
She's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Horowitz. Yeah.
Oh, what's that, Tim?
Richard Horowitz, I think also.
Oh, he's brilliant. Absolutely, absolutely brilliant. So improvisation, getting in the mode of playing first and being open to everything and being able to go wherever you need to go, and then applying it to the specific medium. You have to, you really have to dial in ready, fire, aim like it's second nature. Oh, that's brilliant.
You have to. And also in improv training, they'll have you occupy different characters and things. And start copying people. Sue Blue had this great expression, which is steal with love, which is if you hear a cool voice, just copy it. You want one of these, you can have it. And you'll come up with your version of it. You're not going to sound like anyone else because it's not coming through the same machine. It's coming out of you. I mean, I got to Rosie O'Donnell trying to imitate Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was like, oh, there's my Rosie. Just experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. So it seems like set the vision, lay the playground, and then move toward it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a little piece of, I don't know, in the world, sometimes they call it metaphysics. Sometimes they just call it sports training, where you do what you want and then you set it aside and just do your workouts. I do a set it and forget it, where I will sit down and I will declare what I want, whether I write it or whether I just see it. And then how is none of my business, except that I show up every day and do the work in front of me. And then every now and then when I get anxious, I just go, what was this edit? I said it. I thank the universe that it's here, or whatever you believe in. Awesome. Much appreciated. And then go about my day. Don't be like, is it here yet? Is it here yet? Is it here yet? Because then you've taken all your attention off of what you want and put it on what you don't have.
Right. Excellent. Great. I wanted to share, Lila asked a really good question. She's someone else who's just killing it in the animation world now. She's just like really, I met her a few years ago and she was like, I'm here to do this. And she did, and she's completely doing it. So she's actually in a session, but she asked a question about if you could share a little bit about what is your process? Like, how do you approach, or when you get a character, when you are doing
my process has been completely transformed by games. Way back when I would get a script ahead of time and I would read it, and in an animation script for you look for things like, what does this character look like? What are their physical? Are they really big? Are they really, really tiny? they have affectations? Do they have attitudinal things? How do they move through the world? It's all that basic acting questions. Only you get to be spore mold if you're in the mood. That's what you're assigned to do. But games have also taken it to a whole new level, because 95% of game scripts I don't get ahead of time. I literally show up and I will cold read anywhere from 90 to a few hundred. I mean, I think my record in a session is 560 some lines. No, I've done more. I've done 900. Yeah,
in one session,
hundreds of lines. Yeah, in a session, and you don't get to see them ahead of time. So it's that process of who am I? What do I want? How does who I am move through the world? And then in animation, what are my physical affectations that I get to play with and be in? And little note about physical affectations, people who have them, whether they're an accent or some kind of a speech impediment, they don't seek to have it. They seek to get past it and speak like everybody else does, And so for people who don't speak English well, they are trying to make it sound just like the Americans, just like you, not quite getting there. So those are some layers, but, and then actually a little acting thing that, I don't know, I found just very important. You see it a lot on camera, and when you don't see it, it's very jarring. Jeff Corey was this brilliant sci-fi actor. He was blacklisted in the McCarthy era. He was brilliant, and I was in a class with him in Atlanta one time. I just took from whoever I could find, and he was amazing. And this actor was up there emoting away, and I was just awestruck by how emotional this guy was and how accessible his emotions were. And I was like 20, and Jeff interrupts the scene and goes, "God damn it, people." He was this huge hawkish man. He goes, "Real human beings don't set out to feel things. Only actors do that. Real human beings set out to do something, and in the course of doing something, they have feelings they don't want to have. And they cover them up." So there's that extra layer, and that's quite useful in games because they're a lot more like films, so that's a very important layer. And you can even throw it into animation because how they cover might be hilarious, But anyway, now when I get a game script, all that analysis has to happen ultra fast. And then bam, I go into do a take of the line, and then I'll shift something in my perspective so that the next take is different, because often we'll do like 3 in a row. And I have to organically change my angle so that all that comes out different for take 2. Oh, and then something creative will pop in, and there it is for take 3. And it's bam, bam, bam. And then they edit and we move on, or we retake. Bam, bam, bam. Edit,
right. Which is the rhythm of games, which is the rhythm of animation. We're like, and we're moving on, and we're moving on.
Yeah. And you get there by doing what you guys are doing, by working out every day. That's why improv is important, because it's a place to go play and practice these skills, and every audition is important because it's not necessarily a chance to get a job. It's a chance to create a relationship and practice your craft. If you put it in that lens, you're succeeding every single time. You're batting 1,000.
Right. And when you have the time either at your agent's office or working at home, you can dissect and slow down the analysis process. So you can go like, and this goes here, and I'm going to run through this and do that. You can do that in your own time,
right?
So that when we're here and go deliver,
right? And working with coaches is really important, I think, because it's like playing a sport of any kind. You get in a groove and you don't realize you're making a mistake with that backhand, and because you just have always done it that way, and then someone points it out, you're like, oh, so you have to slow down, and like we skip steps most of the time when I teach. I'm like, right, it's A, B, C, D, and you were going A, B, F. And you're like, oh yeah, that's been working for me so many times. I'm like, yeah, but let's blow you up a little. Let's expand you a little. And remember what D and E gave you? Oh, right.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love the idea of, for me, all this work is finding the nuance within the nuance within the nuance.
And challenging yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Good. Let's see. Erica asks, when you're working on a video game and there's lots of yelling lines or one that stress your voice, do you do extra warm up, or how do you protect your voice?
I actually started protecting my voice when I was, I think, 16. I started singing in clubs when I was 15, rock and roll, really loud rock and roll, and they would mic the drums no matter how small the club was, so I would yell my face off, and it was really annoying. And we would get very long gigs, so I went to a classical singing teacher. I am not an opera singer, but I went to a classical teacher, or And then since then, in my updates out here, there's a great guy I know who teaches Broadway belt in a way that protects this. And you can really, and I really I have a freakishly large diaphragm and rib cage from my entire life. These muscles are just like working and expanding and holding. And so I do a lot of that stuff. And I do sing on the way, and I make sure my voice is warmed up along the way. Yeah, I like to sing on the way because that connects the emotional engine as well.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
it all
yeah.
ties together. Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting because as someone who has trained as an opera singer, I had to learn how to belt. That was a huge epiphany. So I think it's understand. I think one of the most powerful ways to protect your voice is understand how it works, how a voice works in general, and then know exactly how your voice works and where this placement affects things, and being able to calibrate it.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a cold, then you have to be able to calibrate over that, or no talkies today, no talkies.
Yeah, you're right. It's so important. And then along those lines, I'm very fortunate. I actually have a variation in my DNA where I just don't tolerate toxins. I've never been able to drink and party. I've been around tons of
Bummer,
it.
man.
You can imagine. I was starting in clubs when I was 15. I mean, please. But I just could never tolerate it. I was always designated Jen. And I later found out I have a gene where my body's like, no. So I've always eaten clean. And I invite everyone to sort of step outside the cultural norms and how you eat and the things that you consume and put in your body. The great new book out by this guy, Dr. Mark Hyman. He's very well respected, 10-time New York Times bestseller. It's called Food, What the Heck Do I Eat? And that's really relevant because if our bodies aren't well, we're not working. You know, you're not making a dime. Mm-hmm. And that can be controlled in large part by your choice. Right now I'm recovering from a cold, but it's a mom cold. Like when you're holding your kid and they're sneezing in your face, sorry, there's no way you're avoiding that. But you know, by and large, I'm not slowing my body down because the acidification that you get from eating poorly or ingesting a lot of sugar, or the poisoning that comes from eating American wheat, will slow you down, set you back, and cost you money. So,
yeah. Excellent. Very good. Let's see.
And by the way, I have nothing against American wheat. It's what they do to it.
It's not the grain itself.
Poison.
Yeah. I'm not sure how you say your name, but Loai asks, what should your expectations as a beginner in VO be? And I would say, what are your expectations of anything when you're in the beginning of stages that you should, one of the rules of the dojo, we have rules of voiceover and rules of the dojo and rules of voiceover. But one of the rules of the dojo is cultivate beginner's mind. So recognize that when you're beginning is a supremely powerful time. Like you want to take it and put it in little blue bottles and save it as an elixir for when things are like, oh God, this again. Oh, really? Are you kidding? This happened? And you go like, yes, but I want to do voiceover and I love it and I want to know more, and that enthusiasm and that thing that happens, or you wouldn't be on this call, or the thing that's happened a little bit, so you're kind of on the call and like going, hey, what is this? That is the engine of all of this. That's why we keep on doing it. We keep on playing. So I understand it's really super powerful, and understand that it's always going to be changing. There's, like Jen was saying, I'm in class. I needed a little juice. I needed to do it. I think I talked about this last time on the call, but I recommend that people, let me see if I can get myself on the camera here. See what I'm doing here.
You're up. I can see you. You're on the main screen.
I recommend thinking of this is what I call the locomotion of ambition, or locomotion of desire, right? So you want something. This is your desire, your ambition. You want it now. You want to be on a top show like Jen. You want to be doing the giantest next release of games, and this is all your doubts or not knowing. This is what you don't know. This is what you don't believe in yourself. And fascinating that everyone has the same thing 35 years into it. So we want to figure out how to keep these going always. That you're always pushing forward with your desire and your dreams and your ambitions and what you know and how good you are. And you're always humble and know that there's always something else. And then these go together. We don't let them go here. We don't let them go here. They go together. And that's where the locomotion comes from. That keeps us going. Mm-hmm. So that would be my advice. Any thoughts, Dan?
Let's see.
Expectation, and this is an interesting phraseology. What should your expectations as a beginner?
Well, I think you guys covered it pretty well. Your attitude is your altitude on this sort of thing.
I like that too.
You've got it. You have to want it. It's not like, I'll try this. You have to want it. You've got to really push to make it happen. This has to be your passion. It's got to be part of your gut to be in the voiceover business. It's like, yeah, it's fun. And it's fun when you're doing it and you're doing it full time and you're making it happen. It's also fun learning how to do it and learning a little bit about yourself and seeing, what you can tolerate. Can you, as we say in the life insurance business, do you have a rhino skin? You got to let it bounce right off of you. And, is that enough to push you on to the next audition? And so really, it may take a while, starting a voiceover business. And again, back to what I said earlier about, remember, it depends on what you're trying to do. You're starting a business. You're an entrepreneur. You've got to understand billing. You've got to understand marketing. You have to understand, the skill of voice acting, which of course is most important. What is it that makes you different from everybody else?
Right.
And of course, you have to understand the technical stuff as well, because you're going to be required to have a home studio. And you need to learn how to use that. And you're not going to do any of this stuff overnight. So your expectations require a great deal of patience. If you have no patience, one, don't be on the 405 at noon, and two, or at 4 o'clock, and two, the voiceover business is going to be really tough if you have no patience.
Right.
Life's going to be tough. That's so great. Both of you guys, that's so great. I mean, the first word that popped in my head when I heard the question was joy. You're doing this because I think you're looking for a particular level of joy, or cash. And you're after a feeling. But pay attention to where that feeling pops up for you already. Mm-hmm. Find that feeling now. Because the more you are the magnetic and energetic resonance for what you want, the more you're going to find your zone, and the more you're going to equip yourself to go into auditions and high pressure situations already connected to what really matters, which is your own uniqueness, your own skill, your own voice, metaphorically and literally. And expectation is the mother of disappointment. So be careful when you structure expectation. Structure it for success for yourself, which is, I expect of myself not to book this job, succeed, make X dollars. I expect of myself to show up, be fully present as much as I'm capable, and to be kind to myself and find the fun. Because if you're finding the fun, that's what this business is. You're creating fun.
Exactly. And the foundational principle of the dojo, which comes out of my many years of experience and ups and woes and wees and woos of all of this is, and this is the first rule of the dojo, voiceover is communication. Communication is an exchange of vibrational energy. So if you're in this place that Jen's speaking of not expectation, but just being present in the joy of doing the work of trusting yourself, that is what's going to resonate in whatever choice you're making about this particular piece of copy or this animation character or this video game character. And that's what goes out into the world. Yeah. So that's what we cultivate. And that's why we work internally. The internal work is equally as important as what you can do with your voice or how you can analyze something. And then I also think this ties in, joy and money. Why not have joy and money be the same thing? Because money is ultimately just an exchange of vibrational energy. It's just an exchange of energy.
Exactly.
So it's all kind of the same thing.
It is. And that actually, this ties back to my earlier thing I mentioned about set it and forget it. This isn't saying don't have goals. Because you have those goals and you set them, but when you show up to do the actual pursuing of the goals, be in the moment. stop worrying about how, let that fill it in, trust that you've set a path, be open to where the yes is. And, I'm glad you mentioned money, because one of the reasons I started my podcast is that there's an entire side of me that's very business minded. I have two dads, and one of my dads used to call me the little capitalist piglet with great affection, because I recognized early money as security and freedom. And I would like to live I felt hesitant when I sort of moved into pursuing my business side as well, because I thought, oh, people are going to think things. And I'm like, all right, stop. We don't do that. And I said, let's look at that. And I thought, okay, yeah, there's a myth out there that you're either creative or you're good at business. And somehow if you're good at business, that makes you less creative. Or if you're a good creative person, that makes you less intelligent in business. That's a myth that I want to shatter like a million plates and make into a mosaic of the future, where artists have money and power. And that's the world I want to live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And how?
Yeah. So let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do it, man. And then one last thing about the beginner mind, understand that you're in a gestation. So if you make a decision that you want to have a baby, then you will ideally conceive that baby, and there will be a gestation. So however much you want that baby to be here 6 months from now, you don't want your baby born at 6 months. So understand that each of us is on our own individual gestation period, and honor that for you. So one person, it might be a shorter time, one person might be a longer time, but you're in that process. So let's see, now the questions come and we need to hurry because everyone needs to go to work. Any recommendations for animation in New York City? Jen or Dan?
What was the question again?
Anyone in New York for animation, like a good teacher?
I don't directly, but there's a woman named Sarah Elmale, and she's a New York woman, and she's great at it, and she will know. And so if I can get a hold of her and get the resources, I'll pass them on to you, and you can post them.
Cool.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that teach animation, over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Here in LA that are very good at it. You have to find the right ones, be referred to somebody who is, has a lot of success and has some famous clients, or at least successful clients.
Yeah.
There's nobody famous really in voiceover. There's no A-listers. We're not on screen, and there might be A-listers amongst us. Oh, I know who that is. But not amongst the people going, oh, wow, I love that guy's voice. I'm such a big fan of him. It just doesn't work.
Jen, in terms of this business, Jen, I think you're as A-list as they get, right?
Well, I don't think of myself that way, but thank you.
Yeah, no, you are. You're as A-list as they get. On this class in teaching, you mentioned that you teach. What do you teach, and how do people contact you about that?
I teach when I'm asked. I did like NYU had me come to their game program and do like a master weekend, and I've taught once in LA. When there's sort of a buildup of desire, I'll do it. I teach from a very esoteric place. I teach people's being. I remind them of the skills they've learned since their first acting class, which are all the same. And really what we're going in to do is to poke out the holes in the line of flow. And you're not going to come out of my class with a finished scene or a finished anything. You're not going to get through 4 sentences. Right. We're going to spend the whole thing digging into where you're stopped, where you're blocked, and unpack you and open up. And
it's really more the internal.
Yeah, I don't honestly come in with a plan. I come in with the basics in my head, my own experience, and then I key off of whoever I'm talking to. And something else is doing the talking. I don't, when it works right.
Let us know if there's interest. Perhaps we can create a dojo, a landing place at dojo, so you can come in and just do that, and we can take care of everything else.
Yeah. I would love that.
But let us know who's interested. Okay, who's the Broadway belt guy?
Bill Haller.
Oh, say that again.
Bill Haller, Haller. I don't think he'd mind me giving out his phone number because it's business. Excuse me, this cold is something. I've had my face in a bucket of hot water for a couple of days now. It's fascinating how the sinuses work. He is email him as Penguin, Penguin, @earthlink.net.
Awesome.
Bill Haller, Haller. Tell him Jennifer Hale sent you.
Excellent.
He just works out of his little house in Van Nuys, and he's so good.
Excellent. Yeah. And when someone who's so good says someone's so good, that's
he's great.
That's great.
Right.
This is very interesting. Lynn asks, the development of computer generated voices are getting better and better. How do you think certain areas of voiceover will be affected a few years down the line?
Well, we discuss this all the time, and people are panicking and crazy and saying, "Oh, this is the end is coming," and it's like, no. First off, it's going to take years before it can really imitate and really get the subtlety of human voice. Now, I know Adobe has a new program that can take somebody's voice and do all this type of manipulation and stuff. For the majority of work that's out there, it's not going to be needed. It's going to be too expensive probably for companies that are doing e-learning and the majority of the work that's out there. They need a human to do it. And certainly in major commercial work, they're not going to start doing that. The union will never stand for it. And, unless the computer wants to get a residual. I think if you're trying to start out in this business, the last thing you want to do is look behind you. You got to look forward and do what you got to
do. What's your thoughts on that, Jen?
Well, interesting. It reminds me of a talk. I watched a very quick blurb from Jack Ma yesterday. He's the head of Alibaba, and I believe he's the founder. Really brilliant man. And he said, in the future, if you want to succeed, learn how to do what machines can't do. Machines can talk, but they cannot have a transformative experience.
Right.
And, I run into this a lot in games, which is I never forget, it was 1996 or something. This is not a game, but I was working on Spider-Man. And there was this scene where my character had to cry. And I'd heard other people doing scenes and they sort of cried. And I was like, I can't do that. I have to actually be moved to feel like I didn't just, phone in my job. And I was really nervous. I was kind of embarrassed. I was like, I can't. I have to do this the way I do it. And I was genuinely moved. And then I realized watching films later and listening to tracks, you can listen to or watch a performance and you're intellectually engaged. You're like, oh, wow, look at that. But when you're listening to or watching a performance and you're like, oh my God, like it's like a button in me. I'm like, it's instant.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what's going to set certain games projects above others, because people are looking for that transformative experience. And I don't know that a machine's ever going to be able to do that. They'll be able to execute some simple tasks. That's fine. But really pursue yourself and your soul and the expression of that through your work, not in a self-indulgent way, please. In a true, meaningful way, that really internal authenticity, and not wearing your authenticity on your sleeve. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Well, and I also think there's something that's going to be really important, that we stand in this and stand for this, because the other thing, like CDs eroded our expectations of sound quality of that experience from the analog to the digital. And I think the more we're talking to our Alexas as if that were actually human interaction, that there can be a numbness on this side of the receiver side. So the more we can keep on making a difference, that people undeniably like, oh, wait, that wasn't Alexa. That was something that really, whoa, there's no words about it. It just is. And that's our job. That's why we get paid. And that's why we should get paid the money, because we are that connection. So. Good. We've got a couple more minutes. So let me,
I'm going to check Waze and see how long I actually have.
Yeah.
According to Waze, I still have another 15 minutes. So.
Oh, brilliant.
I live and die by Waze. I'm like,
so Dan, why don't we take this quick technical question? And I love that this is what this is about. What questions do you guys have? So let's take this technical question before you have to roll. Trakina asks, what's the difference between normalize and compression?
Well, if I can share my screen, I can demonstrate this very quickly.
Sure. I think you should be able to.
I should be able to. Okay. All righty. All right. Let's go to my favorite program, Adobe Audition, and get rid of that. Okay. if you're looking at this, this is something that I recorded this morning, and it's round. And as you can see, it's very dynamic. First off, what you really want to see and understand is that you are not looking at something from the side. It's not, this is loud, this is soft. If you can see my cursor here, the top is loud, the bottom is loud. This line in the middle here is where there is no sound. It's called the nominal line. What normalization does is it raises the highest peak you have, which would be here or here, to -3. As you can see, I already normalized this. If I go back and take out the normalization, you'll see that it's actually a little bit lower. With normalization, if you record it right in the first place, if you set your levels properly, if you are modulating between, say, -4 and -6 over here on this scale here on the side, that's where you should be. Compression is something very, very different. What compression does is it makes the loud stuff softer and the softer stuff louder. So there's more of an equalization between the two. So in process, and I actually have a webinar coming up next week on processing, what you might want to think about is, if you don't know what something does, don't do it. Is one of my watchwords. But let me demonstrate what each one does. So say if you record really, really low, that's too low. You want your waveforms to be louder. Like I said, you want it to be between -4 and -6, at least your peaks. If you normalize to -3, and you always normalize to -3, watch what happens. It only goes up about a dB or so. This is not something you use to raise your gain a whole lot if your input volume is not right, because not only are you making your voice louder, you're also making all of the noise behind you louder, and therefore you don't use it if you've got just like a little tiny waveform like this. And if that's the case, then we need to talk, because you've got to make some adjustments in your input levels.
You have other problems than compression.
Exactly. It always helps to take a class on how to do this.
Yeah.
So if I normalize, again, it takes it up to there. If using compression, if I can find my compression settings here, compression, single band compressor. This is a very simple thing. What compression does, and it has to be set up properly, and you have to understand what you're doing. This is a preset, but amazingly is called voiceover. Watch what happens when I apply this filter to it. As you'll see, it made the louder stuff softer and the softer stuff louder, or the louder stuff, you know what I meant. But now, with it like this, now I could, at the very end, so you would normalize in the beginning if it's not loud enough, but you got to make sure it's loud enough. After you do a compression, then you can go back and normalize again, and then you've got a much more even dynamic file there. And that's really the difference between the two. Now, if you don't understand that, it takes a little bit of study and it takes a little bit of understanding of modulation. But again, the stuff on top is loud, the stuff way on the bottom is loud, the stuff in the middle is where there is no volume.
Right.
It's sort of like you're looking down at it from the top, not from the side. And I think a lot, when people understand that, they go, oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
excellent.
Hopefully that.
So you got a cache. Dan, how do people keep in touch? Dan's doing a class next week about this. We also have a 4-hour workshop that you can get the recording of that we did a couple of months ago, called "You Should Have a Home Studio." So if you're interested in that, contact me. And Dan goes in depth on all of these things. But how do people reach you, Dan?
How do they reach me? They can reach me at danlenard.com, or my website, homevoiceoverstudio.com. And every Monday night, make sure you watch Voiceover Body Shop.
Yes.
With my my co-host George Whittam, where we talk about we talk about home voiceover studio technology, and we present really good guests. Like we have Carlos Alizraki coming up.
Tell Carlos I said hi.
Will. We have to have you on, Jennifer.
I love that.
It's a fun show. It's a live TV show. You never know what's going to happen, and it usually does.
Excellent.
And that's 6 o'clock Monday night Pacific time.
Yeah. And so contact Dan if you have any questions. He's here every month, but you can contact him anytime. Okay, go get that job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go have fun.
Yeah. All right. So keep an eye on our time, Jen.
Yes.
Let us know where to go. Let's see. I'm trying to find the questions that Jen can answer. We did that.
I have opinions about everything.
So. Yeah, she can tell you what she thinks.
I got opinions about it all.
Often called on to yell violently, attack efforts in deep, muy macho kind of voice, and that yell is punctuated by a burp at the end. Any suggestions on how to control that? Like you actually burp?
Oh yeah, sometimes that happens. That's animation. Oh yeah, all the time. Sometimes what I do, because sometimes a burp takes a while to generate, so I just say to the engineer, all right, I'm going to run this and give me a second for the burp at the end, leave it open. And so you'll run the whole thing, and you may need to ingest some air or do whatever you do to like make that happen. Just put up your hand so they know don't cut the take yet. And then just take a second and leave it clean so they can just cut it together.
So the burp is just what happens from the exertion.
Yeah, sometimes they'll write a burp in where it's like you got to do, and sometimes you have to hold air to make a burp happen. Like there's a
they actually want a burp.
And sometimes if they want an actual burp, you do all that exertion and go, hang on, ingesting air, holding air, nice burp, or fake burp, however you do it, or stunt burp. If someone else in the room is a better burper, get them to stunt burp for you.
7-Up.
Fruit actually can be very handy that way.
Ah, there we go. There we go. The inside scoop. Let's see. Do you need an agent for animation work? Are there places to audition for gaming without an agent?
I'm not as familiar with them because I don't spend as much time in those trenches, but I think there's people creating content all the time. And especially if you haven't migrated your career over to the union work yet, you have a lot of opportunities. Just start scanning online for, VoiceOver 123, I would imagine, has some stuff. I don't know all those engines because I'm very blessed to have my agents that do that for me. But in the beginning, I hustled it, but we didn't have the online options when I was in that stage, or I could tell you.
And frankly, I think in just my 2 cents is you to use the online as practice and to start building relationships, but not to rely on it. Just look at it as like something like that's going to be a place where you can spend a little bit of time, get your hours in, get some relationships going. But the more you can be thinking outside of the box, like think of yourself as a 3-year-old who wants the cookie. So if the cookie is animation, then you go like, okay, how do I get animation? I don't have a baker who's going to give me a cookie. So who's doing animation? I don't know. Who's doing it? Where do I meet people? Like, for instance, at the end of this month in San Francisco is the Game Developer Conference.
Yep.
It's not inexpensive to go, but it's not a massive amount to go either. And all the people who do this, from the biggest people to the people who are like, hey, we got a game, we're putting a game together, are there developing things. So get to know them and ask them how they do it, and then they know you personally. So it's not throwing yourself into the mud puddle. It's like, oh, hey, I loved hanging out with who asked the question? Laurel. I love hanging out with Laurel. She was so awesome, and her voice is great for this. We're gonna write something for her, something like that. So the more you can be thinking out of the box and taking the initiative on this, your agent is always just someone who you choose to help you navigate to where you want to go, but you're always driving the car. So.
Yeah, and that's a really key perspective. Also, doing the improv stuff and connecting with the community, because there are content creators all over the place. And if you have this sort of childlike expectation, because like the part of us that creates is the childlike part. Mm-hmm. But you've now officially split into 2 people. If you're a performer, you're the child, and then you're the one adulting. And the one adulting is developing relationships so the child can go play. And you don't want to be like, someone's going to bring me this, I know. You want to be like, I'm going to go out and get places so my kid can play. And right. So you go out and you develop those relationships with people so your little kid inside you can play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And that kind of ties in with what this subject sort of segues to Billy's question. How did you go about networking, getting known in the community when you were starting out? And how do you stay on top of mind with your clients now?
Well, I did it a long time ago. I got my first VO job when I was still in high school, and it was in Birmingham, and I was stunned anybody would pay me $35 at the time to speak. I was like, what? You know, when you're a teenager, you're like, yeah, especially one whose reputation is a little capitalist piglet. So I bugged the guys at the studio where I recorded, you know, very politely. I call myself the happy pest. And I got them to mentor me, and I made a reel, and 2 months later, my learning curve was like this. So it was terrible in my estimation. It was probably correct. I had learned a lot. And that happened 3 or 4 times. So your first 3 or 4 reels, don't pay for them. Make them at home and let your learning curve bump up. And once your learning curve starts to flatten out a little bit, then you pay somebody a ton of money to make your demo. I took that demo and I cold called ad agencies on a schedule. There was no agent in town, and I made a schedule, and it was nauseating. And I put on a little suit, and I put my hair up in a little bun, and I went door to door, cold calling these ad agencies, having them listen to my tape, following up. And then most of the time they didn't, but they started to get to know me, and eventually work came. And I'm not even sure that it was directly from my drop-offs of my tape. I think it was more just from my applied energy to the universe of, I want that. Can I have that? Because that's what I want. I want to do that. Can I do that? You know? And then, you know, within a few years, I finished college supporting myself full-time voice acting, and on-camera acting, just like in Birmingham, Alabama, which is unheard of. Because you just hustle. I went to Atlanta, and I went, you know, got an agent, but I took every class I could get where I could meet someone who could hire me. I took that class. Yep. And I paid out for it, because you're building a business. It takes money to make money, but you must spend it wisely.
Exactly.
And I stepped it up. It was not fun to drive to all over Georgia and all over Alabama and all the way to North Carolina for auditions and do this and do that and get nothing out of it half the time. And then sometimes you do. It's just what you do. It's what you do. And then I also work the other side of it, because a lot of us actors come to this because we have a certain amount of emotional baggage, which often leaves us with a ton of self-doubt. So I had an opportunity to audition for the only soap opera I ever watched back then, which was called Santa Barbara, because the acting was amazing. It had people like Marcy Walker, A. Martinez, and Robin Wright. And I was like, these people are amazeballs. I want to work on the show. And they were doing a American Idol style casting around the country, and they came to Atlanta. And this is before the internet, so there's only like 6,000 people in Atlanta auditioning. No, 6,000 people around the country. There were 1,500 in Atlanta. I wore giant baggy clothes, really bad t-shirts, really horrible pants, really frizzy big hair. You know, my appearance was not how I traded in the world. With all that, I got this book on brain function, and I read it, and I made an affirmations tape that I listened to twice a day for 30 days. And I went into the audition, and somehow out of those 6,000 people, they wrote a part for me. And I really think it was just the brain training, you know, because there's a lot of talented people and way more good looking people. But, you know, I think that's a piece of it. So.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about. First rule of the dojo: know what you want, ask for it. People will give it to you if you allow. Yeah. It's really the core of everything.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're entitled to nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing. You are the holder of your feelings. You are responsible for your own joy. You are entitled to zero.
That's the fourth rule of the dojo. Yeah. We are essential and we are expendable. There's no room for mediocrity.
No matter where you are in your career.
Yes, exactly. Shall we talk about the new Powerpuff Girls?
Yeah, but I'm actually blessed enough to work on both, and I see my old roles being done by someone else in a very different way. I'm like, oh, okay. And you have attitude about it. You're like, sometimes I will say this. I didn't read for any of the girls in the new production, and I've, you know, in these remakes of things and these redos of things, and even in current things, there was a Guardians of the Galaxy thing going around to read for the game, and I got the sides for Vanessa Marshall's role, Gamora, I think, and I was like, wait, that's Vanessa. So I texted her and I was like, do you know about this? And she's like, no, yeah, or something. She knew about it, but she did not have her blessing to, she hadn't turned it down. So she hasn't turned it down. I'm not doing it. I'm not replacing my friends, period.
Right. That's awesome. And that's
without their permission. Now, Gray Delisle gave me her express permission to replace her in the new incarnation of Shaolin Chronicles thing, because it was a Canadian production and I'm a dual citizen.
I'm a Canadian.
I'm not doing this unless you tell me it's okay. She's like, go ahead. I love you. Yeah.
Good. How are you doing for time, Jen? We're just at 11
o'clock. Let me see what the Oracle of Waze says. Waze says I may have 3 more minutes.
Okay. Shall we do? Oh, this is great. This is so cool.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's see. What got the booking? Oh, here's a great thing to finish. So if we're having trouble accessing the internal feelings button that you reference, are there ways of growing in that particular ability?
So interesting. Therapy. No, it's true. It's true. You have permission to do certain things in your life based on how you grew up. You know, I have this weird permission to go anywhere and ask for anything because my mom had no boundaries. So, or she had really weird ones, you know? And so I'm like, yeah, of course I can do that. I'm going to do that. You know, and other people are like, what are you doing? You know, other things I don't have any permission for, but like, you know, certain that like in God of War, I played a character called Electo who trades on her sexuality and all this. And I was like, no. But I had to access it. I had to have permission for it. You just have to grit it up, suck it up, and go find it. Now, it's easy for me to say, but that's where improv comes in, acting class comes in, just to get through it. And also know that if you're shut down in a particular area, you're just playing a human being. And maybe they are too. My friend Elizabeth Gamza was a really good acting teacher. Gamza. You can find her, do an online search. She is brilliant. Like she's my coach for on-camera stuff, and I'll go in for, you know, Criminal Minds or this or that or whatever. And I'll be like, I can't get to that thing. And she's like, so be where you are. Maybe the person you're playing can't either. Maybe they're so hurt and so shut down, they just can't get there. And you're fighting for something. So just fight to feel anything in that moment. Accept where you are and fight to just get through the day. You know?
Right. And that ties in with the first quote from your first session of Hawkman saying, people, we don't do this. So
yeah.
And I think
be kind to yourself, please. Often what people are shut down because there's an expectation. Also, you have a picture of what that emotion might look like. And that picture is to please someone else, and you're not there to please someone else. You're there to let the muse run through you. So get out of its way with your judgment.
Exactly. And at the dojo, we talk about that as your internal critic. And the second rule of the dojo is leave the inner critic outside of the booth.
Yeah.
Because if they're in there with you, then that's in the way.
And sometimes they're going to come in. And if I can share a brief story, it was many years ago when I first moved to LA, very, very difficult part of my life. And I was berated. My inner critic wanted me to get off the planet. And so I was really fighting to stay here and fighting to be here. And it was exhausting. And I remembered an old movie from the 80s called War Games, where the computers do a reenactment of what it would be like if the US did their nuclear launch and Russia did theirs. And there's this big screen, Ali Sheedy and Matthew Broderick are in the NASA control room. How does that happen? And everyone's like, oh, you know, it's dark and just the screen's launching missiles and their pretend attack. And then the room goes pitch black. And everyone's like, you know, and these words pop up and it says, the only winning move is not to play. And I remembered this. And as my demons were hammering me, I just said, thanks for sharing. I'm sitting at a light. And they're not going to shut up. You're not going to, because if you engage them, you empower them.
Exactly.
Just allow them to do their yammer, and go, I get it. I hear you. Drink some more. And let them just sit in the chair next to you and go, I got it. I'm doing this right now. And they're going to hammer at you, go, I know, right? I'm doing this right now. You know, you can't wrestle them down. They never go away. Trust me, they never go away.
Nope.
They just get smaller, and you just get better at getting up and dragging them kicking and screaming to the next place that you want to go and they don't.
Mm-hmm. And here in terms of the dojo, we identify them, name them, consult them. I'm sorry, what did you think was wrong? Oh, what was your opinion about? Oh, good point. Excellent. I have heard you. Could you please step outside now?
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for being an important part of the team. I'll take it from here. Thanks. But
I once drove from Victoria to LA in a single shot. I pulled over in Oregon because I was so tired, but it was middle of winter, so I kept having to wake up to turn on the car and wake up to turn off the car to stay warm. And by the time I got down near LA, I was hallucinating, and Fear was sitting in the seat next to me, and it had dreads like Seal did in his early days. And we had this great conversation, and Fear's like, "Why are you so down on me?" And I was like, "What? Because you spoil my jam. You suck the fun out of everything." He's like, "No, I don't." He's like, "I am designed to keep you from getting eaten by tigers, hit by cars. I am useful. It is worry that sucks all the joy out of your jam. Don't blame me." And I was like, "Oh, right. And worry's a habit. Okay, sorry." And then I checked myself into an institution. No, I'm kidding. I'm used to it. I live in here.
To the top from there. Yay. Well, Jen, we're going to wrap up because Jen's got to go to a session. I'll just stay with y'all and wrap up. But Jen, thanks so much for coming and sharing your insights. And it sounds like so much. I'm not surprised, but it sounds like so much in integration and overlap that we should really talk about figuring out how to collaborate on more. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you all. I'm gonna go get on the freeway
session and let's see. So we'll let you go, Jen. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Best to you all.
So everyone, thank you so much for being here. We do this. We do this the first Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So you can kind of put it in your calendar. We have different guest senseis, so we get these other perspectives. Dan is always available. If you have questions, go to his website. There's a way that you can send him samples. I'm always available here at the dojo. You can go to our website, which is www.theviodojo.com. Sign up for a 15-minute voiceover once-over. I'll actually be able to hear your voice. This part of this format is frustrating for a voiceover person, but I think it keeps things flowing. Anyway, I love to hear your voice and hear where you're at, and I can tell you more about what's going on here. Yes, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, if you are in other parts of the country, there's lots of. I'm traveling a lot this in the coming months. I'm going to be in New York at the end of April, probably in Atlanta in the middle of April, in Chicago at the beginning of June, and then in the middle of June, I've been invited to teach a full week of voiceover retreat at the Maine Media workshop in Camden, Maine. So it's going to be like a voiceover summer camp in real life. So we'll be getting word out about that. But if any of that is interesting to you, stay close. And I'm gonna pop through. I didn't do a very good job last month of. Oh, you know what? If your question didn't get answered, call me and I'll answer your question. How about that? Lovely to have you all here. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next month, and look forward to talking with y'all. Take care.